Good day, grade 10s. So I hope you were able to go through that first lesson, make some notes, and then that's going to really help you to understand what's going to be going on for this lesson. We're going to move on to ridgelands, okay? So write down the unit topic and date, head up your paper, and then we're going to go through about ridgelands with these areas of high land, okay? And we're going to use chapter 5 to be able to do this, okay? So if you go to chapter 5, which is on page 61, and it just introduces about the 4 different types of landscapes, and we're going to be talking about a ridgeland landscape, which is a primary landscape, okay? And we'll compare that to the other types of landscapes later, okay? And if you look at this book here, you'll be able to see that ridgelands, yep, think of when you hear a ridge, that idea like we did for map skills, where we looked about ridges, where a ridgeland is kind of like a highland, this is higher up, okay? And it goes from here, and it just goes through the differences between each there. And it talks about how, yep, in the Bahamas, it's going to be... So in the Bahamas, we've got Cat Island, where there's a ridge that is over 200 feet, while most of the landforms are always going to be over 30 meters in height, which is over 100 feet, okay? As it mentions here, okay? Now, there's only Bimini, which doesn't even have a ridge over 15 meters in height, okay? Now, what we talked about last lesson, we talked about how the land became exposed and these sand dunes were created, okay? And now there are 2 types of sand dunes that are created. And it talks about at the bottom here, these 2 typical land dunes. We've got these longitudinal dunes known as safes, and these crescents like a crescent shape dunes, which are known as barchans, okay? And we can spot this. So if I was going to say, look at that picture there, which ones have a kind of a crescent shape? You could say, like this one here, this circle here, and up at the top here. Got many examples on this in San Salvador. You can see these crescent shapes. And then when we've got the longitudinal, these safes, we've got all across here, okay? And this is noted on here, so you can actually see on the key, it talks about the barchans and the safes. So those that with a B, so as we looked at here, the B, yep, so they're going to be the barchans, and then the safes up here, okay? So we've got them on there, okay? And we got from there. So overall, these kind of sand dunes have layered up and created a hard, solid rock. And we talked about all those processes last lesson. We go from there. Now, this large one along here is often found by the beach, okay? And this is due to the fact that these sand dunes have built up over time, and the sand dunes can be often are formed at the beach, okay? And that's why we get these ridgelands that are close to the beach. Okay, so if we now go back to the PowerPoint, so you can have a read through on that, and I'm going to come back to certain parts of this book here, so you could read through it and then use those notes and from my PowerPoint, okay? So as I said, yep, I'd make a note about here, I'd talk about the barchans and the safes that you noted down there from in the textbook. And then we've got here, this is from Long Island here, showing a variety of ridgelands on Long Island. The ridges are formed through deposition, creating sand dunes, which have since layered up and hardened up to form these ridges. Eleuthera and Cat Islands are similar, okay? So make a note of that. Then, this is just taken from page 64 here. So we can see from the contours of the map the different landscapes that we can find in each island. And we've got a cross section that shows the changes of the map and then the landscapes that are present across the island. So we've got these landforms that have gone from there. So if you just letting it try and zoom into that. So you've got that ridgeland, and what's next to these ridgelands? Now you can see that from this picture here. near the ridgelands, it's often this kind of wetland that is just behind it, okay? And this can be seen in this cross section here. Go from the higher and got the modern beach and the sand dune deposits there. Then we've got the ridgeland, so like Kelly's Hill, and from down there, followed by this wetland, okay? Now you'll be able to see that better in your books. So, go from here. So, I've got a description here that talks about this cross-section, okay? Notice how the ridgeland is the highest part of land, and there's often a wetland by it, okay? A lake to one side. This happens when, and we've done about how lakes are formed, when the water table, when the water table becomes above the surface of the water. This is a really important thing for locals that live there, because it's going to offer that fresh water supply for domestic use or even in industry or farming, okay? Now, I'm just giving you a clue because that will help for the exam questions you'll be doing. And this map in New Providence, okay, of New Providence, talks about, so to the north of the islands, this long ridge along the from east to west. So, for example, think about like Fort Charlotte, and so by the fish fries, and then you can have those hills where you can look down into town. So, for example, I've got this picture here. So you're from this ridge up here, and you're looking down into town there. And now, when you go on that ridge, you'll be able to explain how that ridge is formed. Okay. Another one, features such as Hunt's Caves and the forming of lakes behind it. Now, so we got the view of the ridgelands there. Now, here it kind of talks about this cave system, okay? And this is from page 66, okay? Because when we talked about the different landscapes, each landscape has these different landforms. Now, a lot of this should not be new, because you've done about the cave systems when we did the limestones, okay? So it talks about how these caves are formed and the different types of caves here, okay? I've made a note in your PowerPoint, and we go from there. But you can just go through the notes on here. So about the different types of caves, how the caves are formed, okay? It goes through the systems that created for that. And then it talks about shafts on page 68, tunnels, caverns, the big caves, and we've done all those parts about stalagmites, stalactites, and obviously, and it goes through for the lakes here, okay? Now, all of these notes will be useful for when you attempt the assignment for this week, okay? So if you go back to, so you can look through, so, and if you look through, so yeah, so as I said, we've got this cave system, got the shafts and the blue holes, and we'll talk about how these are a little bit more when we get into the Rocklands next lesson. But yes, for the homework. So we've got this photo of a ridgeland, and these questions, I've gone through a lot of it. You can get it from the book about naming and the vegetation, the general appearance of the ridge. Then go through and it talks about how ridges are formed, okay? Have a go at those questions. If you have any questions about it, then come and send me an email, okay? And I'll respond to that. So as I said, while the first lesson didn't have an assignment, it was more about making those notes and going through the textbook. That first lesson is really necessary for you to be able to help you answer the questions and going forward, okay? So you've made those notes, you've highlighted them, and then you've completed that assignment, okay? Upload the assignment, you can upload your notes. I'm happy to check through them as well, okay? Hope you're all well, and have a good week.